The following was recorded over a year ago, but for one reason or another, I never released it. It consisted originally of an intro and 8 segments that were presented in a timeline spanning from January of 2012 to the time we moved in July of 2022. I've just now added a segment there to plug in towards the end, but other than that, it's all pretty much exactly like it was filmed last year. It's finally put together, it's finally released, and here it is. Sawadee krap from Bangkok, Thailand. I'm only here for 2 more days and then I've got a flight leaving for Spain. The point of this video is to address a question that I've got a long time ago. I tried to make this video back in January. What would it take to force a man to sell everything he's ever collected, everything he's ever owned, to just get rid of everything and to live nomadically, to move all the way from America to Southeast Asia, and in my case, to Vietnam? I tried to make this video back in January and it was too difficult to get through it in one sitting. So what I've devised is a plan to film 8 additional segments that will be coming up, and I'll film them in different locations as I travel over the next month and a half. And at the end, I'll compile them all together into this video to answer that question. A lot of things went into making this decision, and a lot of things went into making this happen. Just sit through the whole thing to the very end, and I think you'll understand why I pulled the plug. The first piece of the puzzle is in 2010, I went through a rough patch. You see more in the videos now, but at the time we were separated and I wasn't handling it very well. In fact, that's a bit of an understatement. I went through an entire year of being depressed, and in January of 2012, I got on a plane and I headed to Vietnam. I had never traveled out of the country before. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just knew I needed time away from home, and I needed to get as far away as possible, and there is no way to go farther than 12 time zones, so Vietnam fit the bill. I'd already been trying to learn the language a little bit, and I loved the food, so it had to be a good time. While I was there, I met a Texan entrepreneur who planted the seed. He had moved there under similar circumstances and was happily running his own tour company. He explained to me how Southeast Asia was growing and that it was the perfect time. Just come up with a business plan, go there and start my own business. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. So as I said, he planted the seed, but there was always something. There was always an excuse coming up. One of our sons wasn't graduating high school for another year. Then after that, oh, I'll wait until I have this bill paid off. After that, I'll wait until I have this much money saved. There was always something. There was always an excuse. And then in 2013, when I finally thought that I was ready to pull the plug and make the move, I found out that you needed to have at least a bachelor's degree to get a work permit in Vietnam. I never finished college. I had over 2 years from way back in 1985. But I knew that I probably was going to have to teach English, and I wanted to do everything legal and above board. So I took the time to go back to university as an old man and finish that degree just to get that piece of paper so I could move. So I finally got that piece of paper and I was ready to go. It was December 2015. I got that diploma for a degree that I started way back in 1985. Then the excuses continued. Wait till this is paid off. Wait till I have this much money. There was always something coming up. And then, March of 2020, the world started shutting down. I don't have to mention the C word. We all remember that time period very clearly. The images and the stories that were coming out of the nightly news were just heartbreaking. Could have never seen that coming. We were all told to stay at home, and even if our local communities were doing better than the stories we were seeing from elsewhere in the world, global travel was definitely out. I swore to myself that I would go to a new country every year. It's the one event every year that I needed, that I looked the most forward to. And in 2020, we were supposed to go to Australia. That was definitely out of the question, and I was beginning to wonder, would I even be able to get to any country in 2020? Like everyone else, there was even a time period where my work got shut down. So I would just go for these long walks through my city with no cars on the street, no people around. It was just a really strange thing to experience. And
it gets you thinking when you're out walking in that situation, wondering how the world had changed, wondering if I was ever going to be able to go to another country, if I was going to be able to go to one in 2020. That was looking out of the question. So I just didn't know what the future held. So I caught myself thinking, did I wait too long? Should I have made that big move before 2020? It really got me thinking about the future and got me thinking about how much time we got left. Did I wait too long to sell everything and make the big move? Would the world ever return to normal? Because I was really starting to hate the phrase, the new normal, that they were using back then. I just wanted it to be normal.
Then on May 4th, 2020, we got the worst possible news that a parent could get. There was a knock on the door, and when Mara had answered, our youngest son's cousin, but also one of his closest friends. They were super close. He was on the porch and he was devastated. He had rushed straight over to let us know the incredibly bad news. Our youngest son, Matthew, had died in bed the night before. He was only 26, and he was finally living alone with no roommates. He was super proud of living alone, but in this situation, it turned out to be a bad thing. He had a really bad seizure disorder, and he had a horrific seizure in bed. And since he lived alone, there was nobody there to call for help, and his friends found him 12 hours later. As devastating as this loss was for me personally, the hardest part of the whole situation is trying to console Mara. What do you possibly say to a grieving mother who just lost a child? And this was a huge reminder that life is incredibly short and none of us know how much time we've got left. Then on July 23rd, 2020, actually a couple of days before, my father dropped from a heart attack on his way to work. Unfortunately, he just was on life support for 2 days. We never actually got to say goodbye. He never woke up. It's just another reminder that life is short. He was 74 years old, and I know people tell me, don't worry about it. People live to 80 nowadays. People live past 80 nowadays. Even if 80's average, remember folks, that means half of us are going before that. So, just one more thing for me to think about. First my son, then a couple months later, my father. And that's where we are at this point in the story. Now with 2020 coming to an end, where could I possibly go? I swore to myself that I was going to go to a new country every year, but obviously, like you said, global travel was down. Some places were opening up, but you had a 14-day quarantine in a lot of them, and I only had 2 weeks of vacation. So I had to investigate which places were the quickest to get to, but had the least amount of quarantine. And I came up with Bermuda and Grenada. They both only had a 5-day quarantine, which sucks when you only have 2 weeks vacation, but it was better than any other alternative, and it was the only chance I had to actually stepping foot on another country before the year was over. So because it was further south and a lot warmer, I chose Grenada. So we flew out on Christmas Day. Sure, I had to stay in the hotel room for 5 days for quarantine, but at least I was stepping foot on another country in 2020, and my streak was intact. Then on New Year's Day, fresh out of quarantine, laying on Grand Anse Beach there in Grenada, I rolled over, I looked at Mara and said, I'm moving to Vietnam. After the hell year of 2020 with the pandemic situation, with my son's death, with my dad's death, and me dwelling on the fact that I felt like I waited too long to make the move. I just caught myself laying there on the beach, realizing I'd been making excuses for 7 years, realizing there will always be an excuse. And that if it was ever going to happen, if I was ever going to make the big move, I just had to rip it off like a Band-Aid, just all at once, just make the decision and go. It sounds like I was just rolling over to tell Mara I wanted to separate, but that's not the case. I wanted her to come with me. I phrased it that way because I can't tell her to go. I can't make her do things if she didn't want to go. We have grandchildren back home, and I knew there was a chance that she might not want to. I'm glad she's still semi-adventurous, and she said, hell yeah, she wanted to come with me, so that worked out. One more issue did pop up. Even though America and Europe were getting better, things seemed to be opening up. I couldn't anticipate that Asia was on the decline. Thailand and Vietnam both were locked up tight as a drum. I obviously couldn't just get on a plane and go there to move at this point. So there we sat in our Indiana home, still waiting, even though I swore I made the decision, but still we ended up sitting there waiting for either of those two places to open up. But the first one that did, I was out of there. So there I was, like I said, 2021, New Year's Day. I had made the decision, locked it in. I'm definitely going. Little did I know that 2021 was just going to turn out to be just a continuation of the hell year that was 2020. Obviously, Southeast Asia was going through a rough patch with the virus, and Thailand, Vietnam didn't look like they were going to open up anytime soon. And to make matters worse, even after all the deaths and all the horrible stuff of 2020, my mom got diagnosed with cancer, and she was in treatment and battled for most of the year. But unfortunately, mid-December, she had lost her battle with cancer, and we had to say goodbye. So it was just 2 weeks before Christmas, and you know, not a very festive Christmas season that year. So then 2022 started. Would I be able to go then? I think we all know the answer to that question, but let's continue the video here from a different location. See you in a bit. Okay, this is a last minute addition to this. I realized that all of my examples of life is short and things that have slapped me in the face in the last couple of years, and then me asking you how much time you think you have left, that's all based on genetics and disease and what's going to take you out naturally, your natural causes. But that doesn't take into account the one thing that can happen at any time: accidents. Maybe you lose your life because of somebody else's carelessness. Accidents happen. And right now I'm reporting to you from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, just outside of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I'm here in a memorial park that was built for Aero Air Flight 1285R. It was a multinational charter flight returning Army personnel from Cairo back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky here. And if I remember correctly, had 2 layovers, one to refuel in Cologne, Germany, and then of course Gander, Newfoundland. And that's where the horrible accident happened. Just after takeoff in Gander, Newfoundland, the plane crashed, killing 248 soldiers and 8 flight personnel. My best friend Terry Peavy was on that flight, and that was my first experience with death. I never really had relatives or never been to a funeral or anything. My best friend, we were both military kids, so I met him on the military base in Southern California, the CB base in Port Hueneme. We were there together for 4 years. And then my dad retired from the military and I moved back to Evansville, Indiana. He was still there for another year. And then when he had turned 18 and graduated high school, he joined the Army, and luck would have it, he got stationed here at Fort Campbell. It's less than a 2-hour drive, so he contacted me and I drove down and picked him up. He told me that he was going to the Sinai Peninsula, and he came up for the weekend, spent the time with me and my family, and I drove him down the day before they officially left. And I drove him down and said goodbye, and I was the last friend or relative he saw. And needless to say, 6 months later when they were returning, there in mid-December, he never made it home. I remember I was a freshman in college, and the family shared one car, so I was driving it during the day, but then I had to pick up my mom when she got off work. When I went to pick her up, we were driving home, and they had announced this plane crash on the radio. There were no details. It was just an Army plane crash returning people to Fort Campbell. And I don't know why I said this. I can't explain the feeling, but I immediately turned to my mom and said, "Terry's dead." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Did you not just hear that?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Terry's dead." And she said, "You don't know that." And I can't explain it to this day, but I remember saying to her, "I can't explain why, but I just know, I can feel it. Terry was on that plane." Now, anybody who knows me knows I'm not one who believes in mumbo jumbo and ESP and all kinds of weird things, but for some reason that day I felt it. And to this day I still don't believe in such things, but I remember telling my mom that. When the official list of names was released, there I was looking through the paper, and I saw it, and there he was. I was right. I don't know where the feeling came from, but it turned out to be correct, unfortunately. I haven't counted these shrubs here, but I'm pretty sure there's 248. One of them represents my best friend. And if you know anybody that was on that flight, please let me know in the comments. Or even if you weren't directly affected, if you remember it in the news, if you're old enough and you remember it in the news. It was a top news story for about a month before the Challenger exploded and knocked it off the headlines, but I still remember watching the ceremony on national TV when President Reagan came down. If you know anybody who possibly knew someone on that flight, share this video with them. So there you go. Despite all the stuff that I said earlier about genetics and us only having a limited time here, which is all true, and you got to really plan to take care of yourself in the future. I'm not saying be careless and don't plan for the future, but you just, as another good example, if you think back to people who were taken from you with accidents and such, as just another example of letting us know that we're all really lucky to still be here and that life is short. And if whatever you got on that bucket list, start checking it off now, because you don't know when you're going to run out of time. This is the true last-minute segment added to this video. Upon rewatching the segments I recorded last year, I realized that some of you probably think I'm being pessimistic about the whole topic, but I'm sure many of you understand that you've been through things too, and life is short, and you don't know when your ticket is going to get punched. But I wanted to add this segment to help dive a little deeper into my thinking. Firstly, about 10 years ago, I started taking note of celebrity deaths in the news. Everybody's still telling me that we all live to be 80 nowadays, and you need to plan to be around for a nice long time. That may be true for some, but I notice for every Betty White out there who lives a real long time, there seem to be a lot more celebrities kicking off before this magical 80 number. In fact, I think the actual life expectancy in the United States is 81 for women and only 77 for men. I also believe that if you are one of the lucky ones who can make it to that average age, that it greatly increases your chances of being one of those people that really extend to a super long life. But like I said earlier in the video, if those are the average ages, that means half of us are kicking off before that. I guess the only thing we can speculate on is our genetic history, the longevity of our families, and then also whether or not we happen to be cursed with any kind of chronic disease. Did your parents and grandparents both make it into their 90s?
if you're perfectly healthy and have a family history of longevity, then for sure, plan for a long, beautiful life and don't retire until you're 70. I completely understand if that is your case. Earlier in the video, I did comment on my mom and dad both dying at the age of 74, but my dad actually adopted me. My actual birth father died in Savannah, Georgia at the age of 65 in 2015. I didn't track him down until after he was already dead, and he never knew I existed. The state of Georgia, as far as they're concerned, I'm a stranger, not the next of kin, so I've been told that if I order a death certificate, they will just redact the cause of death, and there's no way for me to find out. My doctors and I would both really like to know this information, so if any of you know somebody in the state of Georgia, especially around Savannah, that can help me acquire this information, please contact me. So, genetic heritage. My mom died of cancer at 74. My dad died at 65 of unknown causes. That alone isn't enough to make me assume the worst, but I'm also a type 1 diabetic. So, throwing diabetes into the mix, I believe the average lifespan of a diabetic in the United States, for women, I believe that knocks them from 81 down to 68, and for men, it drops from 77 to 66. So yes, this has something to do with my outlook. I'm not hoping to make it to that average of 77. I'm hoping to squeeze another 8.5 years to make it to that average of 66. I try to stay on top of the diabetes pretty good, so I'm sure I'll make it past that, but I'm just throwing the numbers out. I know some people that are in their 70s and they have a family history of longevity, and they eat well, they exercise, they move like people half their age. For them, yes, it definitely makes sense to plan for a long future and to wait and retire when you're 70. Some of them have even advised me to do the same thing, but I think it would be foolish for me to save and plan for retirement at 70 if my predicted life expectancy is 66. So now let's go back to the timeline. I think we were up to 2022. And now 2022 begins. We're still waiting. Is Southeast Asia going to open this year? Can we go? Good news starts trickling in. Thailand's opening up. Vietnam's opening up. And the mad dash begins to sell everything I own. I have to get rid of my house, my car, everything in the house, all the memories, everything I own must go so I can make the move. So 2022 was perfect, and that is the beginning of this journey and also the start of this channel. So if you made it all the way to the end of the video, please like, please subscribe, and if you know anybody who might want to see this video or you might want to share this with, go ahead and share the video also. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Since I finally released this, I guess next I should answer the question I get from other foreigners in Asia: why Vietnam? And especially from the other foreigners in Hanoi, Saigon, and Da Nang, why Can Tho? Those are interesting questions with interesting answers, but they deserve their own video. So please like and subscribe, and we will get on that as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, everybody.